Hi again. Okay, so in a fairy tale book, this time I'm going to be reading Cinderella. You might have heard of Cinderella before, but this Cinderella, I'm going to be reading it and you might notice a little bit of differences. Okay, so let's get started. Cinderella. Once upon a time, a rich gentleman who was sad after the death of his wife decided to marry again, so his lovely daughter could have a mother to take care of. Unfortunately, he chose a proud and selfish woman with two daughters just like herself. She did not reveal her true character until after the wedding. She ordered the little girl to work in the kitchen and live with the servants, while she and her daughters enjoyed a life of splendor. When the child had finished her work, she used to sit in the chimney corner among the cinders, so everybody called her Cinderella. Her clothes were dirty and ragged, but she was far prettier than her sisters in her fine clothes. Well, you see, this is a very old book. The covers are gonna be off soon, but it's okay. You see, I've got this book when I was really little, so it's very old. You can see it's moving. So yeah, I'm being careful with the book. Okay, there are pictures. There's Cinderella and her selfish mother. I don't think they even care. That little girl. That's Cinderella. They're all doing the work. Everyone's having fun. She has to clean everything. Pretty sad. One day, okay, wait. One day, an invitation arrived from the palace. The king's son was giving a ball. The sisters could not have been happier. They talked of nothing but what they would wear, and ordered beautiful gowns from the best dressmakers in the land. Cinderella would have loved to go to the ball, and the wicked sisters teased her miserably, saying, "Wouldn't you just love to dress up in these fine clothes and ride in a carriage to the palace and dance with a rich young man, and maybe even with the prince himself?" If it was known that the prince was in search of a wife, and Cinderella's mean stepmother had high hopes for her daughters. Soon the great day arrived. Cinderella was busy dressing her sisters, polishing their shoes, combing their hair, and when the splendid carriage arrived to take them to the ball, arranged their gowns so they would not crumple on their journey. When they were out of sight, Cinderella sat down alone and exhausted in the chimney corner and began to cry. Then all of a sudden her fairy godmother appeared and said, "Why are you crying? I wish I could go to the ball," sobbed Cinderella. "Well then, be a good girl and do as I say, and you shall go to the ball. Run along to the garden and bring me a pumpkin." Cinderella found the biggest and best pumpkin and brought it to her fairy godmother, who touched it with her magic wand. Instantly, it became a beautiful golden coach. Now bring me the mousetrap and open it very carefully. 6 mice ran out of the trap, and as fairy godmother touched each one with her wand, wand, it turned into a fine, dappy gray horse. Cinderella was then sent to find a rat for her fairy godmother to turn into heavy pollution, and 6 lizards which became smart men. Look, there's a picture. It's a very old book, so I'm being careful with the book. I don't want to ruin it. Well, now will that be fitting to carry a lady to the ball? Asked Fairy Godmother. Oh, yes, it's wonderful, replied Cinderella. But, you're wondering what you should wear, are you not? Let's see, what would suit you? With these words, she waved her wand over Cinderella, and an instant her rags became the most magnificent dress you can imagine. She was wearing the most costly jewels in the world, and on her feet was a beautiful pair of glass slippers. Off you go now, said the fairy godmother, but might you leave the palace before the clock strikes 12, or all this magic will be undone. Cinderella promised to obey and set off in her golden carriage. When she appeared in the ballroom, everyone fell silent, and the music and dancing stopped. For she was the most young woman in the room. The young prince took her hand and led her out to dance with him. He danced with no one else the whole evening. When he sat down to the feast, he was so busy looking at her that he did not eat a thing. The dancing continues. Cinderella is so happy. She had danced every dance and danced. Okay, look, those are pictures. That's what a ball, the prince and the Cinderella are dancing. And that's the picture before this one. Did not feel tired. Then she heard a clock striking the hour. It must be 11 o'clock. It can't possibly be midnight yet, she said to herself, mindful of her fairy godmother's warning. But as she turned inside the clock, Cinderella gasped with fright and ran as fast as she could from the ballroom. The prince tried to catch up with her as the clock continued to chime. As she ran through the door and down the steps toward the gold carriage, she lost one of her glass slippers, and at the very moment that the prince bent down to retrieve it, the clock struck 12, and as he stood up, the prince did not see a sign of his beautiful dancing partner, and the coach and horses had completely vanished. Behind the hedge in the garden sat poor Cinderella in her ragged, dirty clothes. Beside her was a pumpkin and mice, the rat, and the litter scurry away. When she was certain that the prince had gone, Cinderella made her way home on foot as fast as she could. The music and dancing would have continued until morning, but the prince was in no mood for a celebration, and all the guests were sent away. He took the slipper in to the king and said, "I will find a maiden whose foot this slipper fits, and when I have found her, she will be my bride." Cinderella's stepmother grew very excited when the prince arrived at their house. "It's only a shoe," she said to her daughters. "One of you will be able to squeeze your foot into it." But they tried in vain. It was a tiny, dainty slipper, and the sisters had big, clumsy feet. "Are there any other young women in this house?" asked the prince. "Only Cinderella," said the mother, "but she works in the kitchen and we didn't take her to the ball." "Bring her here," demanded the prince, and when Cinderella tried on the slipper, everyone cried, "It fits! It fits!" The stepmother and her daughters were white with rage. The prince looked into Cinderella's eyes and recognized that she was indeed the beautiful stranger he had danced with, and he took her away to be his bride. They lived happily for many years in the great palace, and the princess, who later became queen, was always kind to her servants and invited them to attend the annual ball. Well, that's the end of Cinderella. So that's another story in the classic fairy tales. Next story, the next video, I'm going to be reading another story. And then after that, I'm going to be reading another story. And so I'm going to be seeing you in the next video. Bye! See you next time!